What's up, everybody? This is Cone here from True Minded Gaming, and today we are going to be going over the strongest picks in the top lane. So for this tier list, I'm going to be separating it into about 4 different sections, and we're going to start off with the God tier. Now, with tanks being so strong, the God tier is going to be predominantly tanks, and number one pick right now is Malphite. Malphite is pretty much always going to be a strong pick because of his utility, and he has the knock-up, and he's playing against mostly AD bruisers, which allows him to scale super well with his abilities and the armor scaling. Next up is Maokai, who got some recent buffs, and he is super strong right now. As you can see, he's played against me in the video. And Maokai is pretty much a substitute to Malphite if you don't want to play Malphite or you can't play Malphite. I think Malphite is stronger, but Maokai is pretty strong and he can lock down a target pretty well. Next up is Rammus. Rammus is an interesting pick, but he's in the God tier because he has great TP plays and he's super tanky. And similar to Malphite, he has that, the scaling with the armor. So after Rammus, we have Darius, who's the only non-full tank in God tier, and Darius is great because he has the heal, he can do great in team fights, he does great pretty much throughout the game, and he doesn't fall off. His early game is really great, his level 1 is strong, and he can do well against tanks. So next up is the strong picks, and this section has a lot of variety because, there's a lot of champions in here, so the strongest champion here and the weakest champion are going to be pretty far apart, but they're still pretty strong and can be picked, and you can expect to win if you play right. So the first pick in the strong tier is Fiora. Now, Fiora has gotten some recent nerfs recently, but she is not as weak as people think. Her early game is impacted because it went from I think 3% to 2% on her passive damage, but late game it went from about 11% to 10%, which is nothing at all. The slow makes it so that you pretty much have to build Swifties if you want to be doing anything because the slow reduction on your E isn't there anymore, and that pretty much was her entire kit with the slow and the E. Next up is Graves, and Graves has also gotten countless nerfs recently, but I think he's still pretty strong, and he can fit into almost any team comp, and he's really flexible with his build. He's also great against the tanks in the current meta. Speaking of tanks, next up is Poppy. Poppy is really strong right now. She can scale super well, and she got some changes. That's why she's not in the God tier, but I'd say she's very close to the God tier. And late game, her Q damage is actually a little bit stronger because they added a percent, but they lowered the base damage. And after Poppy, we have Renekton. Renekton's a super strong early game champion, and it is really hard to lane against Renekton. If Renekton gets ahead early, he can still do well late, but it is smart to build tank after you get your early game power spike and everything. Next up after Renekton is Olaf. Olaf has gotten some buffs to his W and his ultimate passive recently, and he's a really strong pick now. He has a great early game, and as always, he has a great late game. He can dive carries, and he can tank. Irelia, similar to Jax, has also, well, not similar to Jax in the fact that she got recent buffs, but similar to Jax in that they have a really similar playstyle. What you want to be doing on Irelia is just split pushing, and the new build with Ginsu's Titanic makes her pretty tanky and does a ton of damage. After Irelia is Jax, and Jax does the same job as Irelia, although he's a little bit more burst, and Irelia has better one-on-one, and, well, it's pretty equal, but, Jax has stronger bursts with the third auto and everything, but they have similar build paths, and Jax is really strong right now. Jax struggles against Trundle, who's next in the tier list, and Trundle has a great early game matchup, but similar to Renekton, he has to build tankier late game, but he still has that utility with the pillar, and he's great against tanks with ult, so late game, he doesn't do too poorly. The next section we have is middle tier picks that can work, but not as well as strong tier picks, and in an equal skill matchup, those moderate, like the players equal skill, the moderate picks are not going to be as good as the strong picks. And the first pick in the moderate section is Ryze. Ryze has an upcoming rework, but he's still pretty strong right now. You want to be scaling until level 6, and then you can start skirmishing, but still pretty strong. And another AP threat after Ryze is Echo. Echo has gotten a lot of nerfs recently, but he now has 2 build paths for the top lane. You can go AP or the same tank build. And after Ryze we have Echo. Oh, I apologize for that. Echo was right there. After Echo we have Shen. Shen is a super good tank, and with TP he can make some amazing plays, and he does a lot of damage too, and his lane phase is way better than it was before pre-rework because of the empowered auto attacks, which actually do a surprising amount of damage. Now, after Shen, we have Yorick, and Yorick is an interesting pick because almost no one knows how to play him, or play against him, and he can't be countered. He's a great first pick, and late game he can ult the AD carry if he's behind, so he's a really safe pick as well, in both that if he falls behind, he's still going to be strong, and he can't get countered. So, next up is Nasus, who's really, as well as Yorick, an interesting pick. You have to scale on Nasus. I mean, that's pretty well known, but it's really important that you're able to get the stacks early game, and then continue getting those stacks and just destroy the enemy AD carry with your Wither late game. Jace is next, and Jace hasn't seen much play recently, but he's still pretty strong, and the meta is in his favor with the build path right now, with the Death Dance and the Muramana, and Garen is surprisingly after Jace. Garen is here because I thought that he's just really tough to play against, and not many people play him, although in lower elos he is, and he's a really good pick in the lower elo, because he's pretty simple and he doesn't require much mechanics. And Garen is the last before the next section rather, which is weak picks. Now, the wording on that isn't as good as, it doesn't really classify it. They're not weak picks, they're just, should not pick them unless you're really good with them, which I guess they are weak picks, but some of them can be really strong if you know how to play them. So the first up in the weak picks is Vladimir. Now, Vladimir is getting a rework, but currently he is super strong, and he scales really well with the health and the AP from his passive. After Vladimir, we have Wukong, who has great AoE and Engage. I think he falls off a little bit, and his lane phase is pretty strong, but his lane phase is strong, but he falls off late. Other than falling off late, there aren't many weaknesses to Wukong, but he is squishy, and he just doesn't have the potential that other top laners do. Now, next up is Gangplank, and Gangplank was such a good pick for a while, but he just can't do what he used to do because of the nerfs to him. Gnar is a great pick for countering the not necessarily new, the Juggernaut champions, such as Darius or Garen, even pretty good against Fiora, I believe. And the next section, last section, is the top 5 picks of the patch. Now, these are not the strongest 5 picks, because that would just be the god tier. These are who I think that if you want to play top lane and you don't know how to play top lane that well, or even if you do, you should just play these champions because they're really strong right now and they have a great lane phase. First up is Yorick. Second is Darius. Third is Irelia. Fourth is Fiora. And fifth is Trundle. Now, this is actually the last second, but the champions I chose to not pick this patch. Dr. Mundo is the first one. All the other tanks can do a better job than him, and he just doesn't have an impact on the game like the other champs. Riven falls off late and isn't able to do what she used to do in lane, and she's just really not a strong pick right now. Next is Swain. Swain is really annoying, and if he can, get through the lane phase, he can do alright, but I just think that picking Swain isn't a smart idea. Now, Fizz. Fizz has fallen out of the meta because of the item changes, but I still think that it is best to not pick Fizz unless you are a Fizz god. Now, the reason for this is because, as I said, Iceborne and Sunfire isn't as strong anymore, and you're not going to see an AP Fizz top lane unless it's a Fizz main stock with top lane. Now, the fifth pick that I had to not pick is Tahm Kench, and pretty much the same reasons as Mundo. He isn't able to be as impactful as other tanks, and who to expect to get stronger? First we have Olaf, because he's already pretty strong right now, but you can expect some buffs because I think Riot wants to see him in the meta. Same with Irelia, and same with Jarvan the 4th. Thank you for watching this. I hope I was able to help you pick your top laner for this patch, and please like or dislike if you didn't like the video, and please subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.